Hi, everyone, and thank you all for tuning in and watching this very special roundtable. My name is Brittany Berryman, and today I'm joined by three of my colleagues, Dennis Powers, Tom Piambino, and Jimmy Blaney. And we are here to have an open discussion answering your frequently asked questions about the industry's first turnkey modular facility platform we call iCON. For those of you who don't know, GCON Manufacturing IPS launched iCON back in 2018 as a completely integrated turnkey facility platform to help pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical companies improve delivery capacity by standardizing the infrastructure for flexible and readily available drug manufacturing facilities across the globe. Before we begin, I want to let you meet our panelists. We have, again, Dennis Powers, Jimmy Blaney, and Tom Piambino. And let's start with you, Dennis.
Great. Thank you, Brittany. So yes, I'm Dennis Powers. I am the Vice President of Business Development and Sales Engineering for GCON Manufacturing.
And I'm Jimmy Blaney, Group Business Development Manager for Asgard Cleanroom Solutions.
And I'm Tom Piambino with IPS, and I really head up business formation, and I'm also a process architect by technical background.
Thank you. And I should mention also that we're in new times here, so we just really wanted to have a casual conversation of frequently asked questions to answer a lot of the questions that we have come in about iCON. So with this being casual and informal, you will hear some probably feedback in the background, but those are the times we're living in, and we're giving our panelists a little bit of grace. I should also mention that this is part one of a two-part series. Again, it's very open Q&A format. So we're going to start with the first question. And this is open for any of our panelists to answer and all of our questions. So what makes iCON different than IPD? In other words, integrated project delivery. It's a lot of question, a question that comes through frequently. What makes it different?
Well, I think I'll kick in by saying the overall architectural engineering, design and construction of a project takes more of a practical, collaborative, integrated approach, adopting clients, people, systems, client business structures and practices. I think that's the starting point for iCON in reality. That makes it different.
I would add, Jimmy, it is IPD, so I don't know that it is different. The tools that we might employ are different, but it is IPD at its essence. So, IPD's been around a long time, and we've just really created a relationship that makes it work better.
Yeah, you're looking for the same efficiencies, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think when from GCON's perspective, I mean, we actually have built business on the IPD model. I mean, that's really essential for us to execute projects in that fashion and have that close coordination with the partners, with the client stakeholders, all the service providers, because that's how we effectively execute an iCON project together. Is having that ingrained IPD within the project team.
Absolutely. And, I think, the beauty of this panel here that I should mention is, we have, IPS from the engineering standpoint, we have GCON from the clean room manufacturing standpoint, and then we have Asgard, who is a partner of ours on the side of in the European market. So as we have this discussion, we're going to see and get answers from three different perspectives that bring it all together, that really helps it make sense. So as a customer familiar with the old unitized building approach, such as PharmaDual, how is iCON different in that way?
Yeah. Go ahead, Dennis. You're probably best to jump on that.
Yeah, I'll start. So I think, so of course, PharmaDual, I would say, they were the pioneers of off-site construction in the pharma industry back in the 80s. So they kind of started to pave the way, and but as you said, their approach is a unitized container approach, meaning they will build the entire facility at their factory and ship those containers to the site for assembly. which has its merits in terms of you're designing and building your facility in a well-controlled factory environment, which is the biggest benefit. Our approach is a little different in that we look at a box-in-box approach. So, we're integrating our clean room pod boxes within a facility shell building box, if you may.
I think the other thing is Pharmadual pretty much take a standardized traditional approach to designing a facility, whereas iCON have the UberFlex platform design, which really lends itself to most CGMP requirements. And I think that's a fantastic advantage when it comes to fast track projects, especially now with COVID-19. I mean, Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, iCON is, again, it's IPD, and the unitized approach really wasn't IPD. It was all designed and built by one organization and shipped. So it's really drastically different in that methodology. I think the other piece is we really do try to utilize a mix of regional trades as well as offsite construction, and I think that's important as it relates to different regions have different ideas about, what percentage that they really want to off construct. So, it really is a hybrid.
Yeah, and you have different building codes across Europe. So, you've got your European directives, you've got your regional geographical codes, which again, you need to take into account. I think the other thing is with our solution, with an overall iCON solution, is predictability of timescale and cost, which is very important.
Yeah, it's the predictability, and I think there's also with the iCON approach, there's an inherent flexibility with the facility design, so it allows a client to plan for short-term as well as long-term needs when it comes to the need for additional capacity in the future and the need for scale out.
Yeah.
That's all great points. That leads into, there's always that question about costs. This seems like it might be more expensive. So is iCON more expensive than, a traditional on-site modular, design, build delivery system, or what?
Yeah, it's a perspective, really. I mean, from a traditional cost analysis model, really you can't use that model. You really need to look at the overall cost of ownership when you look at an iCON platform, and the speed to market, the depreciation level of the internal fit out. The shell and core is the shell and core part of an iCON platform, but the overall deliverables are totally different, and it's costed, and cost analysis needs to be done on a different using a different methodology, to be quite honest with you. So is it more expensive? In reality, it's cost neutral. For a greenfield site, probably it's more cost on a brownfield site potentially. But yeah, there's a lot more cost benefits to an iCON platform, in my opinion, and from a European perspective.
Yeah, I think if you walk into it, Brittany, without a bias, I think you get to cost neutral pretty quick. If you walk in with a bias that you're really looking to compare stick built and modular construction, and your whole basis is on, a schedule that somebody walks in and says, I can stick build this in the same amount of time, then you're going to struggle with the comparison. But that's so rarely the case. So if you walk in non-biased, it's probably cost neutral.
Yeah,
I would say in the main. Yeah.
And our intent with iCON again is to develop a pre-engineered platform. So when you're starting a client project, you're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. So you don't have all of those additional design costs that you would have. So, when you can take a pre-engineered, standardized, prefabricated approach, there are efficiencies that you're going to gain, and that's what ultimately will bring you to a cost neutral position. But like we said, it's more important to look at holistically at total cost of ownership rather than just what's the upfront capital investment. And again, speed, being able to do projects, months or years faster than a traditional approach, that can have significant financial benefits for the manufacturer at the end of the day as well.
But you've also got the flexibility of deferring capital investment from the get-go with an iCON platform, which is a major advantage to most, if not all, clients.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, if you look at it, right now, at the end of the day, you want to get these medicines out the door for the patient, and so the big picture is that the expense of the facility, okay, upfront, yes, but at the end of the day, you're getting your medicines out to market faster. So if my process platform is still fluid, or I want to accommodate multiple process modalities, can I still use iCON? And if so, what about incorporating large pieces of equipment? So you're looking at this, this entire facility, but what all can you accommodate?
Yeah, I can maybe address that first. So one of the advantages of having, forethought with these designs is that we can test it against different modalities. So, we really have looked dimensionally at, 3, 4, 5 different process platforms and overlaid those into our standard offerings and said, what would I change if I wanted to pivot from one modality to the other? And so that analysis has already been done. So if a customer comes to us and says, hey, I want to be able to, do antibodies, in my first year, but I always want the possibility if I get a client to come in to do viral vectors. We've looked at that, we've overlaid it dimensionally and said we could do either. And, we extend that understanding into the utility infrastructure. So, we're looking at our utility panels and saying, if I parked a chromatography skid at this parking spot within the pod, for the first 10 months, could I then, put a bioreactor in that spot? And what would we need to do to fit out that spot to enable either to happen? And we've done that. So that's the beauty of collaborating with this group is we can test these things prior to a customer coming in the door.
Yeah, and I think it's that, the combined experience that all of our organizations have together also, that really gives us the horsepower to look at all of these different modalities, because really, a big part of iCON is the project execution approach. So, and that can be instilled across a broad range of modalities, and collectively we've done projects with the iCON brand that include, OSD, oral solid dosage, fill finish, cell therapy, and gene therapy. So it really is the iCON approach, and the iCON platform is really conducive to a broad range of applications.
Yeah. So then what's the best way to maximize the value of iCON?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so trust might be the first one in the list. So we often have customers who kind of come to us and say, we're coming to you because we need to do this project differently. If we follow our traditional, stage gate process, we're not going to make our end date. And so, we venture down this path with that customer, and on day 2 it's like, well, here's our standard checklist of items that we need to comply with our internal stage gate process, and we said, well, we need to do this different, so here are the differences that we talked about when we first sold this. So let's explore that, and we can do a quick comparison, but we need to keep moving. And so that's always a struggle. So and really, the more time we take to consternate over those differences, the less value, more value that erodes because time is eroding. So that's one of the biggest challenges for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, because I guess most clients are so comfortable in the traditional approach that they don't want to really go away, because it's a nice, comfortable, tiered approach. whereas they need to embrace the collaborative integrated approach. But I think you're right, day 2, day 3 of bringing in a group of subject matter experts that IPS and GCON and Asgard bring to the table starts to make them more comfortable with the integrated collaborative approach, because it's not the norm. It's far from the norm where it's disjointed from a traditional approach, and that's where the real value is in iCON for me.
Yeah, and it's you're absolutely right. I mean, our industry has done has done this the same way for many years. So it's you know, on the one hand, yes, there's a comfort level with the traditional approach, but I think there's also the risk factor, right? Any change from how you've done things historically is always considered a risk. There's an education process that we have to go through, and it's not just educating our clients about the technology and the building design and the process integration. It's also teaching them about how we execute and manage projects. And you know, so it's important for us to work with not just the engineers and the operations folks, but we also have to work with the procurement teams and the other stakeholders that, you know, have managed their projects using these more conventional methods over the past 30-40 years. So
I think the other thing, Dennis and Tom, is the very fact that, you know, we work with disruptive technology, and we work with disruptive technology vendors from a process equipment point of view. A traditional approach doesn't like to embrace that because they see that as a risk, right? Whereas once we can actually get that comfort factor of trust, then it becomes a lot easier. And the other thing is it takes away, eliminates the duplication of disciplines throughout the life cycle, and stops the client from wanting to man-mark the project team, which really can disable that project team to delivering a project in a timely manner. And we've seen that so many times.
Yeah, I would say one of the big value propositions of iCON is it's a partnered approach. You know, so, you know, IPS has a very, robust architecture and engineering group, right, you know, across the globe. And, you know, a traditional client would come in and they would bid out an AE firm, right, and they would hire them on, and there would be a long period of time before you started to bring in people who, you know, physically build stuff, right? You're spending all this time designing. One of the value propositions of iCON is you know, all these 3 parties are at the table on day 1, and sometimes customers look at that and go, well, it's too early, and it's like, no, it's not too early. That's the value proposition, right? So, you know, and that's not always an easy conversation, because they, you know, they want to put out, you know, there's always this competitive, well, why would we bring in a situation where we're going to compete in the future? And you say iCON's not that way. It's a partnered approach, right?
Yeah,
that's where you're saving time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said it best, Tom. You know, you said, you know, it's the trust aspect and the transparency, and it's not even just trust and transparency, not even just within the collaboration, but there's trust and transparency from the beginning with the customer.
Yeah, it's key, definitely key, and it's hard. We recognize that trust is hard. So
it is.
Right.
Yeah, it takes time to build, right? So.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess when other people see the results from an iCON approach, that will speak volumes in the future, because it makes that trust factor for new clients a lot easier to bear.
Yeah, and we see that, right? So once we execute an iCON project with a client, you know, by the time we get to that project, they realize and understand how we do things, and you know, they come back to us for more projects, which is important.
Yeah. So what are the biggest client side challenges that you've experienced when executing the project?
Yeah, we may have covered that. I think just leveraging the value that we bring as a group is probably the biggest challenge. You know, most of our customers have a procurement system that would preclude us from doing this. You know, they have a very structured approach to bidding concept and then basis of design and then detail, and they want to split all that up. But they also want to build it in half the time. So, that's a key challenge. And if we can't get past that, then, we fall back on the traditional and the time frames that go along with that are where we are. So, to me, that's one of the biggest, challenges is the first couple months of adapting your mindset to this partnered, approach and really focusing on the end, which is getting the product to market sooner than you could have if you had, laid this thing out linearly from end to end.
And what we found is, one of the ways that we've been able to, I'll say, not necessarily overcome all the challenges, but help mitigate the risk associated is when we start early with clients, working with them, the sooner the better, even if it's in the early feasibility stages, because it allows us not only to start to understand their requirements and how they operate and how they've done things traditionally and how we have to help them, to modify, but it also helps to start building the relationship from a very early point in the project. So by the time we actually get to, it's time to actually start designing, we've already laid the groundwork with that client and we know the stakeholders, we know the teams, and they know us.
Totally agree.
Absolutely. Well, those are great answers. Like I said, those questions come, very frequently, and I'm just glad that we're able to answer those and provide some transparency across the board from the three organizations that have come together for all iCON projects. So that concludes part one of our two-part series, The Champions of iCON, a collaborative discussions on global turnkey solutions. Come back for part two, and we look forward to answering more of your questions.
Thanks, Brittany.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep.